So good evening, and that was kind of a little bit of a rocky start today, but here we are, and that's part of life, part of our experience, and definitely a part of Zoom. I find myself really happy when when we don't have some glitch or another during a Zoom meeting. Partly that's me and my less than perfect technical skills, but anyway. So the reason I began thinking about talking about the gaps is partly that we're in a new year, and in this new year, we have a gap. We have a little period of time as we kind of let go of, it's just a concept of 1 year to the next, but it sort of offers us this invitation to take a look at where we're at and to say, where have I been? Where am I now? And what's my aspiration or my inspiration for this next circuit around the sun? So I've done a little bit of that, a little bit of pausing in this time between the busyness of the holidays and the demands of this challenging weather, which you could also see as an opportunity, because there's not much incentive to go out other than feeling kind of hemmed in by the weather. So one thing that I've discovered, and not for the first time, is that it's often hard to make the choice to pause in the midst of multiple demands and allures and possibilities. It seems like there's more allures and possibilities all the time. And the idea of stopping and pausing when you're in the middle of those, at least for me, doesn't feel particularly interesting. On the other hand, when I do stop and pause, it's so refreshing, it's so connecting, and so it's difficult, but learning that it's productive and that it makes a difference is important too. The second thing that I've noticed is that almost always what gets in the way of opening and exploring the gaps between things has to do with some kind of an attachment to the belief in the separate self, an attachment to the belief in the separate self. All the identity characteristics that I feel obliged to adhere to make it difficult to let go enough to open to clear seeing. The other thing I've noticed, and because this idea of the gaps, the spaces between, and what happens in these spaces between has gotten my attention lately more than usual. I find it both experientially and in things that I read or come across, I see that in terms of these spaces and gaps. I don't know who it was. Somebody said it's nothing but the spaces. The spaces are the reality, and the gaps are the reality. And so we'll talk about that in a little different way as we go along here. And I realized as I've been exploring the idea of gaps, of spaces through meditation, reading, and just being with my experience, I'm realizing that this concept has more parts than I realized. And so I really want to talk about that and how that is experienced and understood in not only in different ways, but by different modalities. I've been just the last couple of days listening. Some of you may have heard there's a two-part interview between Tara Brach and Dan Siegel, who's a neuroscientist and a Buddhist, and it's and he talks about, and they talk about it in a way, and I'll get to that later in the talk. But and then I've been reading different books that have, and I'll give you some quotations and pieces from those this evening as well. So it's what we often describe as gaps, or can be described as gaps, is also this opening to emptiness, to the spaciousness of clear seeing. So it's this space between all of the relative things in our lives, all the things that are part of dependent origination, all the things that happen because of other things, and this perpetual wheel that we're on all the time. When we can shift our attention away from that, let go of that, even though the wheel of our dependency goes on, we have an opportunity to see, not only to experience the openness and the spaciousness, but with practice, we can actually experience both. We can, out of the spaciousness and openness, we can see the reality of how we get stuck in these conditioned responses and reactions. So there's a quote from Stephen Bodian in the book Beyond Mindfulness. And he says, you may notice that the sense of me, a me, disappears in the gap. That is, unlike thoughts, a gap is not self-referential. It's just open and aware. This is a glimpse of your natural state. Awareness can be described as the ground of being. So in awareness, in pure awareness, we're in this ground of being. And Sam Harris also describes a ground of consciousness into which thoughts spontaneously appear and produce this sense of I. We come to believe we are the thought. We must be able to pay attention closely enough to glimpse what consciousness is like between the thoughts. So between the thoughts is the pure awareness. And as we pay attention and slow down, this is where mindfulness, this is where meditation gives us a tool to open up and space out the thoughts at least a little bit. In this space between thoughts, that is prior to the arising of the next thought, we notice that consciousness does not feel like self. So that's another way to notice it, in a way, is a moment when you're not all self-referential or aware, but you're just in this. Doesn't mean that you're not seeing things and doing things, but that you're not doing them out of a sense of self. So when we recognize the spaces, the gaps, we can then see the transient nature of thought, the transient nature of everything, actually, the transient nature of our physical sensations, our wants and don't wants. We can be conscious of things other than thoughts. So, so this consciousness of our bodies without self-reference is a very different experience than somehow we're trying to control it all, or we're thinking out of me. So in regard to meditation, Sam Harris says, meditation is the practice of finding freedom directly by breaking one's identification and thought and allowing the continuum of experience, pleasant and unpleasant, to simply be as it is. It's not about trying to achieve any particular state of mind like bliss or visions, etc. So that's one way of looking at it, and that experience of this is just a pain, this is just a moment, this is just a pleasure. All of it is still there. It's still happening. It's still available to us, but we're not gripping it or forming our identity based on it or around whatever we're experiencing. So another way to understand and or place in a way we experience gaps is between the ending of one thing and the beginning of the next. So that might be a breath, and that's often a really good place to place your awareness strongly, is on the time between the end of the breath and the beginning of the next, or even in the fullness of the breath before you release it, to just and then you could, in the same way, a day has a beginning and an end. And in that case, there's a gap when you first wake up in the morning and you haven't organized your thoughts around it, but just being aware of the experience of awakening. And as you go to sleep at night, similarly, you let go of, at some point, whatever you've been thinking about or doing. And if your awareness is there, you can just notice, how there's the story of the teacher. I don't know whether it was a Zen teacher or many teachers, and his student came and told the story of how everything was going great. I'm really being aware of this, that. And the teacher said, okay, so now did you go to sleep on an in-breath or an out-breath? And so that's the precision of putting awareness there and not getting lost in thought. So, and then there's a year, like I was saying, the end of one year and the beginning of the next, or there's your whole lifetime has a beginning and an end and a gap. And I remember John Travis, when I was first starting meditation, and he talked about how one way that people describe Buddhism, and it's been described, is that it's all preparation for the moment of death, because there's a gap for you. And if you've learned to be aware and present, you have the ability to let go enough to be free in that moment of transition. That stuck with me for sure. So we're forced to let go of one thing to experience the next. We can't really experience what comes next if we don't let go of what's passing out. And And in that same process, we have this opportunity to see what it feels like in that transition. And that's a really unique and special place. But it's also, if we find ourselves trying to cling to something we like or to push away something, then we fail and things get out of control. And that brings us kind of to a state of anxiety or confusion, mostly because we become aware that we can't control everything, which is important news to get, but it can feel, it can be anxiety provoking. And this is where a meditation and mindfulness practice provides the tool and the grounding to allow ourselves to just be here without any definition, without any expectation, just to see it for what it is. And the moment we just see it for what it is, it opens up that whole experience, enriches it. So understanding that it is, that to be able to spend some time dwelling in openness requires not attaching to anything that arises. And it offers us another way to explore things, to explore the gaps. Stephen Batchelor, in his book, Living with the Devil, talks about using the gaps to see the totality of both our inner and our outer experience. And there's a built-in conflict between this and human nature. He describes it as Buddha nature and Mara nature. I'm going to read you a little bit of him talking about this. Put my glasses on for this. He says, he talks about William Blake. Well, first of all, he says, Buddha and Mara are figurative ways of portraying a fundamental opposition within human nature. While Buddha stands for the capacity for awareness, openness, and freedom, Mara represents a capacity for confusion, closure, and restriction. To live with the devil, with the perpetual conflict between one's Buddha nature and one's Mara nature, that's what we do. And when Buddha nature prevails, fixations ease, the world brightens, revealing itself as empty, contingent, and fluid. And when Mara nature dominates, fixations tighten, and the world appears opaque, static, necessary. He goes on to say that William Blake evokes a similar opposition in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which he began in 1789, in the year of the French Revolution. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. And let's see, I'll read you a little bit more. Buddha nature and Mara nature are inseparable from each other. Like a valve that can either be open or closed, this organism has the capacity to unfold or shut down. So the Sanskrit term translated as nature is garbha, which means womb. Buddha nature is like the empty, warm, fertile place from which I was born. So this idea of Buddha nature being this warm, fertile place in us. So when I was doing the meditation, I was talking about finding this, or opening to this experience of this place inside of us that is pure awareness. And I'm going to come back to this in a minute, because I'm finished talking about Stephen Batchelor, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what Dan Siegel, how he interprets the same idea. So, but Batchelor also talks about the conflict in terms of religion and society in general. Being present in the middle of things gives us the chance to see without prejudgment the ways we try to escape the truth of human nature. Being present in the middle of things gives us the chance to see without prejudgment the way we try to escape the truth of human nature, which is impermanence. And by grabbing onto the ideology and then closing off other experience, we lose that freedom, no matter what the ideology is. It could be Buddhism, it could be atheism, it could be fundamentalism, it could be Islam. It doesn't matter. They all have that capacity for us to want to cling on to them. Oh, now I've found the answer, and this is it. And once we say this is it, we've lost that capacity to be open and see the truth of our human nature. Just read you this one more quote from Batchelor about, it's actually a quote of, he quotes Milton. He quotes Milton, and he says, in an open society saturated with information, the gaps between tradition serve as refreshing but unsettling wilderness. By dwelling in their emptiness, we're able to return to those questions for which every tradition claims to have the answers. The anarchy of the gaps makes it possible for any ideology or religion, makes it impossible for any ideology or religion to take hold. For the very act of laying claim, even to that in-between space, would enclose it in boundaries and compromise its openness, thereby turning it into a enclosed space from other closed spaces, thus creating more gaps that are beyond one's reach. And he says about, this is Milton. Let's see if I can find this. The path that has led you here and beckoned you into an unknown future has likewise never appeared in exactly this way before and will not again. You are free to go straight ahead, turn right or turn left, nothing stopping you, having gained knowledge for good and evil through eating the forbidden fruit. Adam and Eve were exposed to the anguish and the exhilaration of making such choices. The world was all before them, says Milton in describing their departure from paradise, while they hand in hand, wandering steps and slow through Eden, took their solitary way. So, so this exhilaration, I remember also learning this from John Travis about the realms of existence in Buddhism cosmology. And the one, there's the animal realm and the hungry ghost realm, and there's, but there's one that's the heaven realm. And the heaven realm, everything's perfect. And it's, and the problem with that is it's boring after a while. And the exhilaration, the adventure, the challenge that we are given in this life as human beings is that we have the power to make choice. And if we choose to explore the gaps, these openings, and see, what we get is the opportunity to see the truth of what is, because we step outside of our conditioning. It's still going on, but we can see it for what it is. Then we come back and we live our lives, and we have the opportunity, the option to make choices that expand on that openness, or to make choices to close it down. But this is where we have choice. Everything else is not that way. So to add to this, to look at it through some of the neuroscience, there's a couple of talks that I've heard. One is Dan Siegel with Tara Brach, and the other is a talk that we had, that Rick Maddock, who's a neuroscientist, psychiatrist at UC Davis, gave a talk for the Thursday night group a couple of weeks ago. And he talked about it in terms of the fact that there are two streams. I'm not going to get into this because I don't have a deep understanding of it, but he talked about how we have these sensory pathways, which is the dorsal stream in our brains, and that conveys all the sensations of our experience: fine touch, vibrational, 2-point discrimination, the position of the joints, and so these are not concepts; they're sensory experiences. And then there's the ventral stream, which it carries the information from the visual cortex, and information processing takes place there. So this is how we process things. We think about them. We perceive them as things, and we form memories and all of those things. So when we're focused on the in-now experience, and we can sort of see that there's two things going on, that one is happening with this perceiving part of the brain and conceptualizing, and the other is happening based on based just on our sensory experience. They're running along at the same time, and they're intersecting with each other, but they're different. And so seeing that is one way of seeing how things get formed. Now, Dan Siegel came up with what he was talking about. It's kind of mind-blowing for me. Is different, a little different. So he's a neuroscientist, just as Rick Maddock is, but he's describing a time when, I think what he said, is that he got invited to a conference that was primarily physics and quantum physics and other the most current physics teaching. And they were teaching that they said, here was a quote. They said, awareness, energy is the movement of possibility to actuality. So what does that mean? Awareness, energy is the movement from possibility to actuality. So, and then he was talking about how formless, that that actually the formless source of all form, there's a formless source of all form, is really this possibility. So it's kind of like the energy is this, there's this, you know, you can call it the pool of awareness, you can call it emptiness. It to me, it's like, it's just another way of saying the Zen phrase of form is emptiness, emptiness is form, because there is this, and he described an exercise that I gave you a very primitive understanding of in the meditation, that if you see a wheel and the hub of that wheel is pure awareness, and the periphery of the wheel is surrounded by all the ways we receive information, all the sensory forms of thought and sight and hearing and, you know, all the senses. And so that's the, and there's so there's, no, those are the spokes of the wheel. The spokes are all the senses. And the outside is whatever we're aware of. So if we're aware of, at the front of our awareness is the sight of something, maybe a lamp, let's say. I'm looking at a lamp, and we can see it, and then we can bend that awareness, that seeing awareness, into this hub of pure awareness. There is this capacity for this opportunity for it to dissolve and open up into an experience that's more pure energy, pure awareness. And you can see where the
Maeve, you're muted for some reason. You just got muted.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this idea that this energetics happens, and that and one of the things that he also said is that if you look through almost all religions and all practices through time, whether they're religious, spiritual practices, indigenous practices, there is always this part of the some people in these, some of them are seen as mystics, or some groups are mystics, but there is always something about this mystical experience that is available, that people are touching into, and that it and in science it's coming together. It's like, so neuroscience is seeing it in some ways, quantum physics is seeing it in another, the Buddha saw it. There is this, there is, in these spaces, in these gaps, the ability, and this is, as far as we know, we don't know about other animals really, but pretty unique, that we have the capacity to see both, to through this awareness of the open nature of things, we can see how we get trapped, how we get caught in wanting and conditioning, and because of that, then we operate through a certain amount of choice. At least that's my understanding or feeling about it. So let me see if there's anything else before we open this up. But he talked about doing this kind of, Dan Siegel talked about doing this practice, that I described to you very, very roughly. I want to know more about it, about trying to bring what you experience into the space of open awareness, with, he said 50,000 people. And in that practice, people pretty universally describe this opening of the heart and this feeling of warmth and love and opening and clarity. And so I think it's something worth looking into. More will be revealed. I suggest you listen to him about it too. So I have a poem. Well, maybe I'll open this up to discussion and I'll read the poem just before we have announcements and metta. So what I'd like to ask you is if this makes sense to you, if you have had any experiences that reinforce this or not, and any questions that you have. So please feel free to, let's see, to raise your hand or just unmute yourself if you have something to offer. I know this is, yeah.
I'll attempt some kind of form of questioning.
Okay.
But it's an amazing talk that you have brought in all these pieces of information. I find it really rich, and I really want to explore it further with Dan Siegel's and Tara Brock's conversation. And I don't think Rick Maddock was probably recorded, but
it was recorded.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Mary Helen has it, so.
Okay, that's great to know. So I guess for me, what comes up in my mind in terms of these gaps that occur, just, whether it's in the moment with the breath or whether it's between years or in life or however the gaps are, how can we, in practice, I understand how we pay attention to it, but how do we key into it, like practically, in a practical sense? Like, is there can you think of a practical way that we can bring that to our attention? So kind of off the cushion, as well as, helping to pay more attention on the cushion.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then. When I was doing the meditation early, the first part, so if you're watching this on a recording, you wouldn't hear that, but I said, look for, see if you can imagine or even feel in the very center of your being, a place of softness, warmth, kind of a pure awareness. Does that resonate at all?
Well, when you were doing the guided practice, I was kind of doing some tech stuff, so I wasn't really meditating with you. But it does, but it's also like, it's kind of vague to me, that particular way of bringing it to my attention. So that's a little vague.
So have you had moments of time when you felt kind of a pure awareness?
Yeah, but I think it's kind of random. I don't think I've actually, besides just showing up for the sit or whatever I was doing, I don't know how to bring the intention or my awareness to focus on that exactly.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe it's different for everybody. I'm sure it is different for everybody, but but to so learning to feel it, to notice what the actual physical sensation of kind of that gap is, whether it comes randomly or whether you're working towards it and you get it. You know, it's like learning to know what it feels like. And you know, so for me, it's often associated with warmth, a real warm feeling without any tension. And it's kind of like just a feeling of warm energy. But so just practicing, you know, and it might be that you've had an experience that's connected to something, you know, like you were looking out over a mountain and everything just opened up. And so can you kind of recall that? So working with trying to know the experience. And when you do that, and you're then practicing awareness, and you're remembering to practice awareness, you can kind of look for that in yourself. You know, that's always there, a little seed of it, and not so much if you're sick or angry or whatever, but to the extent that you can, to go there and put your attention there, and then that other part, which is to bring whatever your other experience is going on, and seeing if you can couple them, if you can bring that other experience, so you're into there to see what happens. It's as a meditation practice.
It's so interesting. It seems very subtle to me.
Yeah, I think it's pretty subtle, and I think that's what you're trying to do, is to increase its prominence in your experience and the ability to work with it.
Great.
Good question.
Thank you for bringing this up. It's really interesting, and I'm really curious about it. So thank you.
Yeah. So hi, Merle.
Yeah, I did listen. I mean, I was doing the meditation, and I listened to Tong Lin earlier today. I can't remember Pema Chodron's teacher's name, but so I have confusing feelings about, you know, the subtleness, or confusing feelings about if you're not sick or you're not angry, you can feel it or whatever. But when we were doing the meditation, I saw, and I'm in kind of more of a dense space these days, and so I saw this still lake during the meditation when you said that, and then it had mist, and it was cloudy, and so it was gray, and I didn't feel, I definitely, like I said, in a dense time, but I didn't feel bad about it, which was good. You know, I didn't feel really, and that's really still, and that is not exactly Hawaii or anything, you know.
No.
It was just the lake, and so it also, for some reason, I diverted to, when I was cleaning today, I was cleaning for somebody, their house, and I had a moment where I stood with the broom for a second, probably because I have been really trying to listen to a lot of teachings, because I am trying to get my health back, and just a lot is going on. And I did have a moment where I was standing with the broom and I was gone, and I knew that I was like, just, and it wasn't a bad feeling, because when I came back, then I knew, I didn't know when I was standing with the broom, but when I came back, I went, oh, you stopped thinking. Hallelujah. I don't know how long it lasted for, probably not. I think there's no time in that space, so there's no real, so it's like, could be like endless, probably, like, you know, because there's really no time in that space. But But anyways, and then we got through the meditation, and one of my things that's going on right now is pretty heavy. And my daughter started to text me, and that's one of the things that while we finished the meditation, and I just had the consumption, the need to read it, which I'm by the rest of the night I probably shouldn't. I should really rest up, but and then I haven't had a gap since. But
But that's really
and I've been
interesting.
in and out of listening to you, in and out of it listening to you, because now my mind is like that. So
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to remark about that is that, yeah, so there's that experience of opening to that, just nothing, to opening. And that's part of this, and it's really good. And the experience of the lake and and that visual of that feeling is another way of experiencing what I described as the warmth. Sometimes it can be cool. Sometimes I've had the experience of just feeling like I'm underwater or something, and it's just quiet, So but the second piece of it is to put the two together, so that you can open up into the spaciousness, which doesn't have a time and it doesn't have a space. And you can look as this ability to contact that grows, then you can watch. Things will still going to come in your mind, probably. Something might come, but it doesn't have the resonance. It doesn't have stickiness to it anymore. And you can see that's seeing the truth of what is, of the combination between the mundane and the universal, or the conditioned and the universal. Anyway, anyone else have something they would like to share? Let's see, Priscilla first, and then Gwen.
When you're talking about it, I think for me, the experience of the metta, expanding the heart, and is a place where I lose that sense of I, of self-identities. And I feel as though that's a place of safety and security, and it sort of brings forth this experience of this timelessness and this space that, of course, I think it's what we want to bring more into our lives, at least for myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think the practice of the metta, at least for me, is something that it encourages this space, and it makes it more available. Mm-hmm. So that's my sort of quick entry.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's absolutely true, because it's the heart. You're putting your attention on the heart, and then it's like the Brahma Viharas. You're bringing in loving kindness, compassion, joy, and this holding of everything in equanimity. And yeah, that practice cultivates that. That's for sure. It's a good.
Thank you for the talk. I thought it was very good, and you actually brought a lot of things in that, often there's not the time, or the time isn't taken to bring in all these different aspects, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Gwen, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes. I wanted to say something about am I muted? You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. About the gaps, because this is going to be a great practice for me to try, because I don't know if it's digital society or if it's always been something, but when a gap comes, I go for a distraction. Check my phone. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But I mean, there's all kinds of distractions that you could go to. So, yeah, I'm going to give this a try. It's a much more fruitful use of the gap than reaching for a diversion.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting though how you go for, or I'll speak for myself, I go for that diversion. Is it because I don't want to be present? I'm not sure. Or is it I just haven't practiced being present in that gap? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're conditioned not to experience it. You know, that's like there's this kind of sense of when you lose that sense of self, you know, which is what when you become aware of kind of being. Dan Siegel talks about the experience, and who's that woman that had the stroke of genius or stroke of insight? Though they both had a very pleasant experience when they lost the sense of self. He had an accident when he was 20 years old, where he lost his sense of identity for a couple of days, and but if we have that, or a lot of people who I've heard who've had in meditation, this opening without preparation or understanding what it's about, they get scared, you know. And so there's a part of us that doesn't want to do that. And so the grounding in being in the meditation, mindfulness, feeling your body, and just being curious, what's here, you know, so that you can begin to see, you know, just calm yourself down from not, you know, going to the phone or doing that and just saying, what is this? And without wanting an answer, it's like just an exploration. That's why I call it exploring the gap. It's just, let's see what this is like. So good luck, Gwen.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're probably getting close to out of time here. Let's see. I do the metta, and then Jen's gonna give us a little talk. Okay, here's quickly. I'm gonna read this poem, and then we'll do the metta. This is Sangha by Donna Fells. Teach me what I cannot learn alone. Let us share what we know and what we cannot fathom. Speak to me of mysteries, and let us never lie to one another. May our fierce and tender longing fuel the fire in our souls. When we stand side by side, let us dare to focus our desire on the truth. May we be reminders, each for the other, that the path of transformation passes through the flames. To take one step is courageous. To stay on the path day after day, choosing the unknown and facing yet another fear, that is nothing short of grace. So that's a tribute to all of us who are willing to do this. Okay, right before the metta, Rick, what do you have to say?
Sorry about that. I meant to clap my hands. I really like that. I didn't mean to
Oh,
raise
okay.
them.
Oh, it is. It's clapping hands. Okay.
Okay.
I just didn't recognize the icon. Thank
No
you.
problem. Yep.
Okay, so let's do a little metta here. A quick one. So feeling this space in the heart, this connection. This is a connection, this heart, to our inner self and to our outer self, and to each other, and to this whole crazy, whatever this is that we're part of. We're connected. So as we feel that sense of inner connection, a balance between the inner and the outer, we can send these wishes to ourselves. May I live with an open heart and an open mind. May whatever blocks or covers my heart or mind be dissolved, so that through open-heartedness and open-mindedness and clear seeing. I may experience true happiness. May I feel strong and healthy in my body and my mind. May I have peace and ease and safety in my life. May I be protected from both inner and outer harm, and may I awaken and be freed from suffering. And as we wish these things for ourselves, of course, we wish them for each other. And we send these wishes out to this group gathered here this evening. And we send it out to those people in our lives who are in our families, our friends, our neighbors, people in our community, all the life that this community supports, our pets and the creatures we share the air and the earth and the water with. We send these same open-hearted, open-minded wishes for peace and safety and health to all beings in this community and all beings around this country, around this whole globe. We send these same wishes. May we all live with open hearts and open minds. May we all live in peace and ease and understanding of our interconnectedness. May we all have the things we need. And may we all awaken and be free. And then we send these same wishes out into the universe and beyond, to all beings everywhere, those that are seen and unseen, known and unknown, born and to be born. May all beings everywhere be happy, be at peace, and be free. And if there's any benefit that we have gathered through our practice here this evening, may we dedicate that benefit to the well-being, to the awakening of all beings everywhere. Jen.